because the pandemic that we are faced with, the crisis that we are faced with today, has demonstrated yet again the importance of a free press, of a free media. And we will be talking about all that with our various team panelists who have joined us. I will introduce everybody as we get to them to save time. In the beginning, in the beginning, I would like to request Ms. Patricia McPhills, who is the representative and director of UNESCO in Pakistan, to give welcome remarks. Ms. Patricia is new to Pakistan, so we welcome you here as well. She joined the team in January 2020, and she has extensive experience in the UN system, including work for United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees, UN Women. She's worked with UN Women in the South Caucasus and United Nations Children Fund, the UNICEF. She has also held senior positions with the UN assistance missions in Afghanistan and Iraq. And without further ado, Patricia, I would request you to give welcome remarks for this webinar.
Okay, thank you, Sadaf. Thank you, Sadaf. And really, I want to, on behalf of UNESCO and our partners, the European Union delegation in Pakistan, the Embassy of the Netherlands, the Embassy of Sweden, and Media Matters for Democracy, we all welcome you to the 2020 celebration of World Press Freedom Day. We're very honored to have with us today the EU Ambassador to Pakistan, Madam Kaminara. Apparently she's having some difficulty technically connecting, but hopefully she'll be joining us. Ambassador Plomp of the Netherlands and Ambassador Johansson of Sweden. And certainly we really give a big thank to our distinguished speakers, Ms. Jahangir of Dawn. I guess she's also having some difficulty connecting, but will be joining us. Mr. Afridi from the Tribal News Network, good morning and thank you so much. Mr. Hashim of Al Jazeera, Mr. Anwar of the Pakistan Peace Collective of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. Nice to see you again, Mr. Anwar. And of course, Sadaf Beg of the Media Matters for Democracy, really for moderating this event. Just briefly to kind of, in addition to a welcome, a free and independent press is really essential at all times, but is particularly important during a global health and economic crisis such as the one we are experiencing. At a time when many seek information primarily online, the role of professional journalists and media workers who are trained to help sort through the flow of information and provide guidance is really extremely vital. While the public looks towards the media for reliable information, journalists are now facing a variety of challenges in fulfilling this task. This is what we're trying to explore today in today's webinar in the context of Pakistan with the help of our esteemed speakers, our panelists, and the questions of you, the observers and participators. It is only through joint multilateral collaboration and coordination that these crucial issues can be successfully addressed, and we are deeply committed to this global effort. It's also important to help the media and journalists report on the crisis effectively and safely, to promote critical thinking, and to limit the spread of rumors and misinformation. We're looking forward to a stimulating conversation. Once again, we really welcome all of you for your participation, and we look forward to the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. The ambassador of the EU and Rola Kaminara had joined us, but I think she has unfortunately disconnected again. I'm keeping an eye out. As soon as her profile becomes active again, I'll invite her to speak. Okay, so let me just give me a second. Let me figure out. I got a message that she's connected, but I still can't see her active profile here. Okay, just to save time, I will actually move on to our first speaker. And meanwhile, I'll keep connecting. I'll keep trying to connect to the esteemed ambassador herself. The first speaker who has joined us today is Mr. Shabbir Anwar, the CEO of Pakistan Peace Collective. And this is a very interesting initiative, if I may say. And Mr. Shabbir will be talking to us about the misinformation side, the infodemic side of this whole pandemic. We have heard the words pandemic and infodemic almost collectively throughout this crisis. And this has led to very interesting debates on press freedom as well. We have heard discussions on how to legislate around it, whether there should be legislation around it, what approaches would be best supported to protect public good on one side and ensure that press freedom is not threatened now or in the long run either. I'm looking very much forward to hearing from Mr. Shabir Anwar on how the government of Pakistan is tackling misinformation during COVID-19 and how do they feel about protecting press freedoms while they go about doing that. I am still trying to connect to Madam Ambassador, and after Mr. Shabir, if she's able to connect, then we'll get her remarks as well. Shabir Saab, please. मैं आपकी ऑडियो अनम्यूट कर रही हूँ जी now you can speak please.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Sadaf, and really appreciate this initiative of UNESCO to be talking about an issue which is equally important for everybody, not only in our part of the world, but it's a global issue which has now surfaced to a level that we are all concerned. So I will try to be as brief as possible because I don't want to get into discussions regarding pro and cons of press freedom or other things associated with that. But I would just like to tell you what we in the Pakistan Peace Collective, which is a small project of the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, what we are trying to do as regard misinformation or disinformation that creates problems in the society. So basically this project was focusing on how to confront the issue of violent extremism in our country, which was again a global issue. And we faced almost similar problems in that as well with regard to disinformation and misinformation that was creating problems, and also how those people who were trying to create disruption in this society, how they were using or misusing social media and other forms of communication to project their point of view. So we have been tackling these issues. Even the journalists and the press or media had problems at that time as well in coverage of various incidents or reaching out to certain people. So the same is the issue as well today, that because of the extraordinary circumstances or situation, journalists have problems in reaching out to certain individuals, to certain people, or to have to cover certain areas which they want to. So these issues would obviously, during the crisis situation, it is expected, quite obvious that things would not be as normal as they are in normal circumstances. So what we have trying to do as far as this project is concerned, we have conducted research on this issue earlier as well, and now recently we have updated our research. I wish we could have time to share some of the aspects, but maybe later sometime we would share it on our website. So based on that research, we tried to build up a sort of learning course for journalists, for parents of these children, for students in the universities, so that they know how to check the facts, how to handle disinformation, and how to uh, correct the ongoing information flow. So there were a number of initiatives that were taken. Even in the beginning of this year, we held an international conference uh, where we invited international experts to talk about these issues of disinformation and information on social media in particular, and even how do this affects the other forms of communication like television or print media or any other form of information that reaches down to the people. So I must add one thing that obviously during crisis situation, the urge among the people increases for information. So you can say the demand side increases, and obviously the supply side is not as strong as the demand in these crisis situation. And besides that, the quality of products also suffer. The quality of information also is not to the level that can help people totally. So while there are a number of institutions, both at national and international level, who try to give out facts and figures, there are number of other people, particularly on social media, who are trying to project their point of view as to how they perceive the issue. So that sometimes creates difficulties and problems for the people who are the consumers to understand as to what is the uh, exact situation on ground. So recently we have also started this educating the students online through our programs. We have already engaged with 5 universities in the last 2 weeks, and that process is continuing. And we have also started a Ramzan transmission program on Ash Television, where we try to again educate people on various aspects of this epidemic, as well as uh, uh, how to correct the things that they have uh, seen on media, particularly on social media, and how to check the facts. So this is briefly what we are trying to do. Obviously, these are difficult times, and despite the fact that uh, all the departments of the government of Pakistan, all the concerned departments, all the information setups, they're trying to do their best to reach out to the people and to give them the facts. But still, obviously, as I said, the demand is so much that it is very difficult to for any institution to fulfill those requirements. So that it's all now becoming a responsibility of the society as a whole, that they should be able to uh, correct the facts and guide the people wherever they are sitting, whatever they are doing. It's a joint responsibility, I must say, which has now drifted. So that's what I wanted to say in the beginning. So,
Thank you, sir. It's it's heartening to see the government taking some of the challenges seriously, and we are very interested in the research that you're conducting, and hopefully, if you share it with us, we'll be able to share them with the attendees and the participants that are present here today. Unfortunately, I just got the access to the EU ambassador, and I'm going to be bringing her into the discussion as well. शबीर साहब आपके पास जब भी कंप्लीट हो पब्लिकली अवेलेबल फॉर्मेट के अंदर अवेलेबल हो रिसर्च, प्लीज डू शेयर इट विद अस, शेयर इट विद यूनेस्को, एंड वील इंशाल्लाह डिस्ट्रीब्यूट इट टू everybody who is here. And yeah.
definitely, once we complete the analysis portions, and also we are still waiting for certain inputs from various quarters. So it will take a bit of time before we can conclude.
Sure. We are very much looking forward to it. And with that, I will welcome the ambassador to the EU, and she's the head of delegation and the ambassador of the European delegation to Pakistan. She joined. She came to Pakistan in September last year, September 2019, and before that, she has been the director for Africa, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, and the Pacific in the Directorate General of the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. So she's really bringing in a truly global perspective to Pakistan. She was previously Principal Advisor and Head of the Task Force, Knowledge, Performance and Results. I think something that's again extremely pertinent, the idea of knowledge. Itself, I think we are seeing a new importance being given in the whole COVID and COVID management situation. From 2012 to 2013, she was a European Union Fellow at European Studies Center of St. Anthony's College, Oxford University. And from 2013 to 14, she was the EU academic visitor at the same center, specializing in EU policies as well as in the geopolitics of the energy policy. Miss Androla Kamanaras, first of all, I would like to extend my heartfelt sympathies for the situation that is going on in Europe. And obviously, it's one of the most affected regions right now due to COVID. And at the same time, we thank you so much for taking this time out. I'm requesting you to start your video. You should be getting some kind of a prompt for the video to start. So yeah, we can see you now. Thank you so much to you, to your team, for the EU for supporting this initiative. Yeah, with that, I'll request you to start the welcome remarks, the opening remarks for this. I know a bit late, but yeah, on to you then.
Thank you, dear Sadaf. Good morning to everybody, and let me start by saying how pleased I am to be participating in this event on World Press Freedom Day, and to be doing that in a multilateral way, because we're here with our partners on Media Matters for Democracy, the Embassy of Sweden and the Netherlands, and also, of course, UNESCO. I also would like to thank for your kind comments and sympathy to Europeans suffering from a European continent which is suffering from COVID now. And if there's one thing that we all need to take away, is that this pandemic sees no borders, stops at no borders, and therefore, in order to address it, we can only address it in a multilateral way. In fact, just to say that yesterday the European Union, with a number of countries across the world, launched an initiative to have pledges for funds for addressing COVID and finding a vaccine. The aim was to get a pledge of $7 billion. In the end, it was over $8 billion that were pledged in a multilateral, whole world, whole humanity type of approach. Coming now to the title of today's webinar, Journalism in Crisis. I think at times of crisis, I think there's two elements to the crisis. One is the more general issues that have been threatening journalism over the last years, not just here, but everywhere. On the one hand, the issue of maintaining the traditional forms of media, while a lot of people were switching to social media, the issues of misinformation, the issues of attempts to, let's say, curtail the freedom of the press. As I have just heard the very interesting comments of Mr. Shabir, I fully agree with him that in the times of crisis, there is a higher demand for information, and it's much more difficult to ensure quality of information. But in these times of crisis, quality of information can also be a matter of life and death, because if people don't have the right information about how to protect themselves, how to what to do, and what are the risks that they face, then potentially that could put them in danger. In this sort of context, also, it's also very, very important to make sure that journalism is used in order not to have any backtracking on any of the other issues like human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, any of the fundamental rights that citizens have. Because in a situation of crisis, it's often one of the issues that we see. One of the effects that we see is that there is a tendency to clamp down on other fundamental human rights in view of the crisis. Let me just very quickly say that the EU delegation in Pakistan has been supporting issues of freedom of the press and democratic processes through a number of ways. One is through our development cooperation programs, which also includes supports to parliament on democracy, capacity building of human rights through government and civil society. Through, we have been supporting the implementation of 27 UN conventions under the GSP Plus status of Pakistan, several of them also referring to freedom of the press. And more recently, in view of the appeal that Pakistan has issued for support in its response to COVID-19, we have very strongly supported a series of principles of engagement of donors and the government on how the funds and how the funds that will be provided should be used, and what are the principles of actually ensuring that those funds are address the most needy, address areas where the situation is worse, but also to make sure that in the situation of a crisis, none of the fundamental freedoms we don't see any backtracking on any of the fundamental freedoms. So in that respect, I am very, very delighted to be here. Sorry for the technical problems I had at the beginning. I won't take any more of the time, just to say that I've seen the CVs of the very important panelists that we have, and I look forward to hearing them. So thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the floor. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, madam. With that, I will quickly move on to our first speaker from the field, Ramsha Jahangir. And since we are running a bit short of time, I'm going to be quickening up my bios. Ramsha is an award-winning journalist. Her focus is on technology, FOE, and she has worked extensively on misinformation as well. Ramsha, to you, and we were discussing this earlier as well. What I would like you to highlight quickly would be the, how the access to information part of it, the access to information part of the equation when it comes to freedom of expression, especially with related to COVID. How do you see that playing out? Do you think that is having an effect on how FOE is being practiced in Pakistan? And does COVID specifically raise any special questions or concerns that both us as journalists, activists, and the government should be aware about?
Thank you all for having me. It's an honor to be here and to discuss this important issue. So COVID is a very new problem, challenge that the world is facing, not only Pakistan. And with the challenge, of course, comes the challenge to find accurate information, because this is the information age. There are a lot of developing theories about where COVID emerged, where the virus was first, how the virus came into being, the cures, And lots of theories about how the virus can be contained. So this is a developing situation, and this is why it's very confusing as well, and it's very hard to fight misinformation with hard facts. And this is one of the biggest challenge that journalists and fact checkers are facing right now. So just an example, for instance, when the outbreak was new, a lot of people said that hot and humid climate is going to contain the virus. And the Prime Minister also said it, world leaders also said it. But now we're saying that it's not the case. So, and then a lot of misinformation has also been peddled by the government leaders themselves when they say that young people are not at risk from the virus, or like I said, the weather issue. So there are many developing theories that are being said in official meetings by the government. So that becomes problematic. And then to challenge that, when you challenge that with hard facts, people say that, people start quoting articles that have covered that, or world leaders saying that. So that becomes a problem for journalists as well, because people are not going to believe what journalists say, unfortunately. And there's also this large mistrust in the media, specifically in Pakistan these days, because they think anything being critical or anything opposing what the government says is something that is not in the national interest, or that is a propaganda against the government. So I think this is also a very important time for journalism to be reintroduced to the people as something that is critical, and also something that is fact-based, which is why I emphasize a lot on fact-checking and fighting, debunking things with hard facts. About access to information, of course, we're not out on the field. Everything has gone digital. We are not doing investigative reports out there in the field, in the hospitals. So there's a lot of, and media workers, specifically in Pakistan, don't have the equipment required to protect themselves from the virus, and they are not going to risk those out on the field. This is why we're also seeing an increasing number of media workers contracting the virus in Pakistan. So there is this lack of access to information, and at the same time, when there is a lot of confusion about the facts and figures, about the confirmed numbers, I think that's where the problem starts, that you're not out on the field, you're relying on the government and the official figures, and when you ask them for questions, you are named to be critical and looked down upon, and then you face a lot of harassment online as well. So yes, this is a big challenge right now to find the hard facts, and then to also report on them, because it's not a very pleasant environment.
So Rumsha, here I bring in a very quick other question, and I know we were supposed to have more time, but we are running a bit behind schedule, so I'll request you to keep it short as well. As you mentioned, the nature of journalism is changing, and we are increasingly reliant on technological solutions. You work and report extensively on digital platforms as well. Do you see a role there? How platforms are responding, specifically in terms of this partnership that now, to kind of facilitate access to information on COVID, platforms are forming with governments themselves. How do you see that playing out in context of freedom of expression, and access to information?
So the platforms have stepped up their efforts to fight misinformation and are working with the government. For instance, Facebook is the first. They've also introduced an official channel with the government to highlight if there is anything in violation of local law or is against the government guidelines on COVID. So they're going to remove that content on their platform. So they're working very closely with the government. They have also introduced multiple digital efforts like awareness chatbots with the government. This is for WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. So they're working on that front as well. Google has made an information hub on their platforms to allow access to accurate information and to give people the resources they require to read about COVID. Twitter has also introduced an information hub, which is not available to all countries right now, but they're in the process of rolling out. So a lot of platforms are doing, YouTube, for instance, has a strip when you open it up that says that it gives you a warning of sort to find accurate information about COVID. So the platforms are stepping up, but I think in Pakistan, Facebook is one platform that is the most popular as well. And they've stepped up their efforts. Like I said, they've introduced these awareness spots, and they're also working with the government to highlight anti-COVID content on their website. However, in terms of enforcement, I feel that they're not that. For instance, yesterday only Dawn.com highlighted some disinformation campaign that was highlighting fake news against the army chief on Facebook's platforms, but the Facebook didn't remove it. It's been days, and these kind of things can be very dangerous and spread within a minute. So I think that's a big issue because they're relying on AI a lot, because even I understand they also are short-staffed right now because of the COVID situation, but then this is a challenge they need to face and address.
So, yeah, everybody who's contributing in the chat, I am looking at your comments and I'll take them up later when we come to the question answer session. Tayyib, I would like to move to you from here. Tayyib Afridi is one of the founders of Tribal News Network, and his organization is bringing forward a perspective from an area that we have traditionally seen as information dark. Tayyib, on your platform on TNN, a couple of weeks back, I saw a story about officials actively blocking access to information on COVID. What are you and your team facing on the ground in terms of information and reporting? Has COVID itself, or has 2020 itself changed in terms of access to information and freedom of expression for your reporters? Because we have seen political developments there as well. FATA is no longer their newly merged districts. So what is the shift that you have seen overall in FOE, particularly with COVID, but generally as well?
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you, Sadaf. Actually, of course, we have seen the shift. There is a major shift, and everybody is now here in KP. They are looking for online information about the COVID and information about other things that they needed. Especially with the COVID-19, there were a lot of rumors. For example, the most, I would say, the rumor that spread across the KP was that if you catch the COVID, the government they will give you an injection with poison so that you don't infect others. It was a very, like in the villages and across the KP. So, and there were other disinformation messages, such as messages about the remedies, that how can you cure the disease. And thirdly, we found that the doctors were also confused about the disease. They didn't know what to say. Initially, they said that the symptoms are cough and cold and these things, but it turns out to be people having no cough, no other symptoms, but they got COVID. So there was confusion, and a lot of people were asking, looking for information that how can we define, how can we differentiate between facts and myths. That was the issue because all the way, whenever we receive information or we are asked questions, the questions were about that, what are the facts? And unfortunately, the facts are that it's a virus. We do not know much about more than that. It's confusing. People say something, and then if you look for, World Health Organizations, so they even cannot explain it completely for you that this is COVID and this is not. So that was also an issue until now. Since now people are talking about the vaccine, and again, this information, this type of information is also incomplete information in terms of, like, people say that the vaccine has been been introduced or about to be introduced, because normally if you see a clinical trials, there has to be like the BBC reported, many others reported that there should be 12 to 18 months for a vaccine to be come out and to be distributed. But there are people who says that they have local remedies and they can cure the disease. So people usually look for that type
Yeah,
of
from your
information.
sorry for cutting you in because you were interacting with a populace that has traditionally been kept in the dark. Do you think the susceptibility of believing this information is higher in the remoter areas of KP?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's very higher because there is no alternative information. Even government is not clearly coming out with message. And secondly, a lot of people who are uneducated, I would say, that do not have access to internet. So the people who read information and they pass on information, normally those information are also, I would say, misinformation. They miss something in the information. So the message is not always complete. Um, that is also an issue. And secondly, the local correspondent from these areas, they're also looking for authentic information, but they do not know how to find authentic information and to share with the local people. But the most, I would say, the most still people in tribal areas and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they listen to radio stations still. And one of the reasons that they believe in COVID-19 is because of the news coming out from the Europe and America, which has been covered by the big radio stations such as Voice of America in the local language and BBC in the Urdu language. Because this question, I have heard a lot of people, even in my village. I spent 2 weeks in a village, and the question was that, how come this is so bad in Europe or in America? Um, it means that this is true. It's not, the media in Europe and America is not something that they will tell you the government side of the information. So one of the things that people believe in this COVID-19 is because of the news coming out from the West. That is why people believe in this information. And even there were people that they were not ready for anything else because the Western countries are suffering very much. So that was also one of the things that but still people believe on small stories. Like, for example, in my group, there were people who shared pictures, photographs of the different people, of the affectees who were who were affected by the COVID-19, and they said that this young man was killed by the coronavirus. And I immediately asked, like, do you know him? The person who is now dead, do you know him? And he said, no. It was forwarded by it was shared by someone else on Facebook, and I just got it and just shared it.
Okay,
So
so
that is going on,
yeah.
on
On that
social.
note, I would like to bring in Asad because there are a couple of things that both Tayyab and Ramsha has mentioned. Um, this whole idea of people not believing in the media, that this crisis of trust, and then on top of this, this whole national narrative that we have seen being pushed, kind of, that reporting and actual reporting, especially when it's about negative facts, somehow comes to harm the country. Asad, you have a different perspective. Asad Hashim is from Al Jazeera. And as Tayyib was saying, one of the outlets that are publicist, they tend to believe in more than our own local media. Do you see this whole idea of this crisis of trust having an impact on how media is able to engage with the public? And with that, the question of how different it would be given the restrictions that are there already in terms of practicality. As Ramsha said, we are not out in the field. We are not working in the way that we used to work. And do you think it will kind of have an impact on an already disenfranchised press that lacks public trust? This distance, this increased distance, how does it stand to have an impact on how media is able to perform its primary functions?
Thanks everyone, and thanks for having me here. Sadaf, yeah, first I'll start with addressing your questions. I think there's already that crisis of trust with the media in Pakistan. I don't think that was something that COVID-19 created, but there is definitely, as Ramsha and Tayyab have both raised, this idea of when there's so much misinformation out there, and a lot of it is in fact being perpetuated by news organizations as well, that does definitely serve to further erode whatever little trust was there. And as Tayyab says, yes, there's a little bit more trust in what's coming out from international organizations. But I would also argue one of the things I've been surprised about covering this now for the last few months is that I haven't really heard any, as we normally do in these situations, I haven't heard any conspiracy theories about in Pakistan about, oh, how this is something to keep Muslims down or keep Pakistan down somehow from the West. And the reason for that is exactly what Tayyab identified, is that once people see that this is something, this is a disease or a virus that has no boundaries, and that in fact European countries have been the most hard hit, and the US has been the most hard hit, that kind of like conspiracy element goes away of the misinformation. But what is still there is the fact that, exactly as Tayyab raises, is that it's a virus that we don't know very much about. Science doesn't work that quickly, right? That's not how the scientific method works. And so we're building our understanding of it every day. We're beginning to understand new things about it every day. And as we move forward, hopefully we'll have a better handle on how things are going in terms of stuff, basic questions, things like, if you get it, do you have immunity or not? Do the antibodies actually take, or is it something that you can be reinfected with? How are lockdowns working? Are they effective or not? What kind of sine wave should we be following when it comes to easing of lockdowns and resuming them? What policy is best in countries like Pakistan or developing countries where lockdowns will also stagnate the economy, perhaps to a crippling point? These are all questions that we're learning in real time, and I think media needs to be extremely responsive, because our traditional ways and lens of understanding these things is not necessarily applicable. I did want to talk about, exactly as you raised, a thing that's sort of like really hit me during the coverage of this thing, is the practice of journalism. And as Ramsha and Tayyab both say, you know, we can't access primary sources in the same way that we normally would anymore. In a way, COVID is the best form of censorship. It keeps you in your home. You're not really able to go out there, right? Like it's the kind of censorship the Pakistani government wishes it could impose on journalists all the time. Thankfully, it can't. I do want to talk about how it is, you know, it's the dangers and risks while covering this are so completely alien as compared to what normally goes through our heads when we're doing risk assessments. The virus it's pervasive, it's everywhere. And while it's not malicious, it is ubiquitous. It can infect you despite your having taken the best precautions, and it can kill even the healthiest of us. So for me, I'm actually a lot more comfortable taking on the risk of, you know, the traditional risks, if you will, of reporting in Pakistan, things like abduction or violence against your person. Again, this is not because some misguided notion of bravery. I definitely don't want those things to happen to me. But with those kinds of risks, you can plan for them. You can put systems in place for protection. You can put systems in place to monitor or avoid surveillance. You can be more aware of your surroundings. You can't do that with COVID, can you? Because it is everywhere. Because it is literally as you step out of your home or step out of a safe location. In a sense, COVID really strikes at the heart of what we do as journalists, because it restricts our ability to access the story directly. Under any other circumstances, my instinct as a reporter in this situation would be to be traveling to hospitals around the country, talking to doctors who are dealing with this and developing an understanding of how it works, meeting with patients and humanizing their struggles, traveling to observe how restrictions are being placed or observed in different parts of the country, and if indeed aid is reaching those who it needs. But in a pandemic, you can't do any of those things, really, not safely. COVID it's pervasive in that sense. It also comes with a mental burden for our frontline mental media workers, right? So as an international news worker, I am sort of perhaps more protected also by my organization, and so they're very understanding when I tell them, listen, it's not necessarily safe for me to go to a large gathering, etc. But that's not happening for a lot of people in the domestic press, and they're still being sent out in the field. Today I saw a story out of Peshawar about a camera person over there having tested positive for COVID, and again, he was doing his job and had been at a press conference, I think a week before or something. And so this is a completely different danger from one that Pakistani journalists have become used to. And in that sense, I think it's really taking a mental toll and will continue to, in addition to the toll that everybody else is already going through of not knowing that much about this crisis and not knowing that much about, you know, how to get better, how to stay safe. I think in all of that, the challenge is to continue to find ways to be true to our readers and to our responsibility as journalists at a time when primary sources aren't as easily accessible. We have to continue to adapt and find ways to report the truth that are both safe and accurate. And we have to make sure that we're not betraying our responsibility at a time of emergency, at a time of crisis, when arguably the public needs us more than ever. It's funny, the very thing that has always been anathema to us, I think, this idea of practicing journalism from a desk and not out in the field, is now what we all need to do, and we need to adapt to it. We need to, I mean, I'll be honest, for the first couple of weeks, I kind of felt like I didn't know how to do my job anymore, because every time I thought of, okay, this is what I should do, I was like, oh, well, but I can't do that. That's not safe. But we have to adapt. We have to figure out how to do this job from, you know, using all of the resources that we have available to us. We're in a very connected world now, and there are ways to do this. It's just something we need to reorient ourselves towards as journalists. In closing, I just want to give a little note about how we are definitely seeing surveillance and other forms of tracking and authoritarianism creeping in to the normal during this crisis, and it will be difficult to see those things pulling back later. This is something that we as journalists need to be very, very aware of, and I think it's something we need to continue to report. Ramsha, I think, has already done a story or two on this. And the Pakistani government is definitely at the forefront of what all other many other governments are doing in terms of tracking people's cell phones, using ISI systems that themselves exist in some kind of weird legal space to do this. So that's something that we need to be very aware of. I think Pakistan is in a dark place when it comes to press freedom and when it comes to citizens' freedom in general, and we need to make sure it doesn't get any darker.
Thank you, Asad. Thank you for that. I'll quickly go to the questions because we are short of time, and due to technology, it's not something we can just extend, and people have been staying here since the beginning. I see one question that's been posted by Khatak Saab, and yeah, before I move on to that, Asad, you pointed to, you know, this whole censorship thing that you're comparing COVID with. I think that's so true, and also if there is censorship with regards to that, the effects are lethal. I think while COVID can be seen as a censorship tool, what I'm seeing it is also something that we as advocates can kind of look at as an example of why press freedom is not something that's important for the media, but that's important for the public itself. We saw this in SARS, we saw this in COVID, controlling information, not giving public access to information that allows them to make healthy decisions, safe decisions, has a direct impact on public safety and public health. And when we try to make this argument in a political way, and this is the argument we always make, press freedom is a freedom for the citizens, it allows you to make democratic political discussions, it kind of has unfortunately fallen on deaf ears. But now this freedom means the difference between life and health, between health and disease. So it's also something that I see coming up as a point for advocates to focus on and work around. We have one question, and because we're short of time, I'll ask all of you to give like literally 1 minute answers. Iqbal Saab has pointed out the number of COVID positive journalists that we are seeing. And there have been in KP as well. I think there are 8 in KP now. Across the country, we have seen journalists testing positive. What measures are media houses taking? How does the media itself, the industry itself, protect its frontline workers? Ramsha, I'll start from you, then Tayyab, then Asad, but please keep the answers to 1 minute.
I think that's something that I also mentioned initially, that there's not a lot of awareness being given to media workers by the media organizations on how to take safety precautions, how to do social distancing. A lot of organizations I still know are still not work from home. They don't allow that. And in places where it's absolutely not possible, they're still not using social distancing measures. And it's also because the media industry is already struggling and going through a financial crunch. So there's also this lack of resources that they can afford, and not every media organization can afford that. So there is no support from the government or other organizations to media organizations itself. And the one of the striking thing that I find is that media is also on the front line, but from the government side, they're not identified as frontline workers. So that actually reflects the kind of priority we have at the moment. And like you said, the numbers are going up. A lot of media workers are contracting, and it is high time that we start giving them a priority as frontline workers and advise them to take social distancing and a precaution seriously.
Sadaf, I think you're muted. You were muted when you were speaking.
Oh yeah.
So, Tayyib, I'm just putting the same question to you. You are in a different position because you are one of the founders. Do you feel that added responsibility towards the people you are engaging in your media house? What precautions are you taking?
There is no science. We are just following social distance. Everyone is in their home and they are working from home. That's the only thing we can do, and it is possible. Other than that, I mean, we do not have resources to provide safety gears to our report correspondents. There are around eight people who got infected by the COVID-19 journalists. And then the journalist bodies in Peshawar, they met spokesman of Ajmal Wazir and they asked for a quarantine center for journalists because it's getting difficult for journalists because with the passage of time we see that there are other journalists that they catch COVID-19, so it's getting serious. So that's why they met the spokesman for the chief minister and asked him that provide them quarantine. But he said like, yeah, we will provide you, but you don't see anything. So that is something, and everyone is talking about the journalists that they do, we care for journalists. They are the frontline people. They are fighting, along with the doctors, but who cares? I mean, you see there are issues, a lot of issues of the journalists, and none of them have been solved by anyone. So it's type of, I think for us journalists, we have to,
Difficult, yes.
yeah, we have to come up with something, possible, innovative type of, to solve our situation or challenges. I mean, government is not coming up to solve our problem.
So,
Although they should have done that.
okay, I will move on to Asad, but another thing that we didn't come up is how, when journalists are given any safety gear, there is feedback about the optics of it, and they are being criticized for getting even masks when they should be going to doctors. It's a very weird kind of a public narrative being built where journalists are being not being categorized as frontline workers, which they are, and actually actively being targeted for even having access to safety gear and using it. Asad, how do you guys do it differently? Is there an international community responding in some way else than our local media?
Yeah, so I think definitely, obviously, the international news organizations are much better funded and resourced when it comes to this. And so they've been, the guidelines for us tend to be slightly different, whether you're talking about Al Jazeera, BBC, whoever else out here, Reuters, AFP, all of the wire agencies. Yeah, I think my colleagues have talked about what's going on in the local media quite well. I'll just narrate this one example. There's a friend and colleague of mine who works in Quetta, and he works for a local television channel. He's an NLE there and also reports. And he was telling me, I was talking to him about how cases are spiking in Balochistan, and he was saying, yeah, things are quite bad. And at this point, I'm just, because I have to go to the office every day or lose my job, I'm basically resigned to the fact that I'm going to get corona at some point, and I just hope I survive. And I think that is the reality of pretty much anybody who is still working for a local news organization as being asked to work from the field, which is most people. For international organizations, obviously our guidelines are different. One thing I will say about PPE, so we are not actually provided PPE either. We have lots of flak jackets and stuff like that, but we don't really have any gear to protect us from corona. So no, we're kind of in the same boat. So the way that we've dealt with it is, all non-essential reporting trips or anything that involves going to a location that could potentially infect either us, or also journalists can be carriers, right? Because we are one of the few people in society who kind of go all over the place. And so we want to limit that exposure as well. I mean, I could, potentially be an asymptomatic carrier who then, if I meet like 20 people, it's spreading the virus. So that's something we're very aware of. Lastly, I will say on PPE as well is, it's impossible to conduct an interview with somebody if you're wearing PPE. You can only really be there, right? Like you can't really interact with anybody. And since our job is interacting with people, I don't know if that's useful. I was last week I went out to visit a bunch of mosques to see if people were following the Taraweeh orders. Sorry, earlier this week, and last week rather. And yeah, I had a mask on and I was hand sanitizing and everything. But because of the virus, even though I was there, I wasn't really able to interact with people. I wasn't able to speak to them because when you speak, you have to get closer to people. You can't really wear a mask. That doesn't engender any kind of trust between people when you're doing that. So yeah, I think corona is quite a difficult reporting environment.
I think the ambassador to the EU has asked what we would like the EU to do. How can they support? I think I'll take that question and then move on to the closing remarks. We've already 5 minutes up the scheduled time. I think the one thing that we look for towards the international community support for is speaking out about the things we cannot. There are lots of things that the local communities cannot mention. And obviously, the international channels have, all the international community has their own channels. They have diplomatic channels. They work with the government more on a one-on-one basis. So just utilizing that relationship to highlight some of the concerns that we have, and the concerns that, and highlighting and sharing the best practices that are in place in your countries. I think that's one of the things that we really rely on the international community to do, especially the diplomatic community here, because they have a more closer and diplomatic relationship with the government itself. With that, I will be moving on to if any of the participants has like a very urgent, quick thing to say that we have missed out in the conversation, I will take that before we move on to the closing remarks. Asad, Ramsha, Tayyab, is there anything you really need to bring into the conversation now? But you'll have 1 minute to do that.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
Okay, Ramsha and then Tayyab.
I think one thing that we've definitely missed out is the privacy concern. We've touched surveillance, but then I think privacy is a very, very important issue. There's also an app rolled out by the government just for journalists, which uses location data and personal information. Only yesterday, details of volunteers of the government's Corona Tiger Force were leaked online, and they're still continue to be leaked online, and this is thousands and thousands of volunteers. So I think journalists, because they're already at risk, they're a vulnerable group in Pakistan, I think it's very important to be very conscious of privacy concerns and the kind of information you give out to the government at this time. I understand it's a national emergency and some measures are required to be taken, but then they're doing cell phone tower tracking, which is involuntary, and that is the kind of thing that we always need to question once the emergency is over, because like the track system, we don't know much about it, even though we try to question a lot. I think these questions need to continue being asking, so there is a lot of transparency and so that it can be held questionable later on.
Tayyab.
Yeah, I just I just want to add that a lot of journalists, I know a few of them here in Peshawar, they are actually, they do not feel good about the situation. So they are psychologically, you can say, tortured, and they are now very much isolated in their homes in terms of, they say that they have quarantined themselves. This type of situation with the local journalists. So my point is that do we have any sort of support for local journalists if they are going through this type of situation? I think that this is also very important, you know, to care about the journalist emotional, you know, issues, because you know, they are the people, because everyone is talking about the journalists, you know, so that they are the important people. So if they are the important, there should be an emotional support for journalists.
Thank you, Tayyab. On that, I have something to contribute. We held a training with journalists from KP on COVID reporting, and mental health was one of the aspects that we covered. And we did see, and I was surprised because usually I see emotional questions coming from women, but all of the men who are covering from the field had very pertinent questions and had really touching stories. With the support of the EU, actually, we are about to launch a mental health line support under a project that we are running, same, and hopefully that mental health line, not just for journalists, but for their families as well. We are working our best to work on that, and we are trying to make it functional in the next couple of weeks. We really hope, and we are thankful for the EU support on this, and we really hope that it's going to have a positive impact, help you in somehow, some way, whatever little way it can. With that, we come to the closing remarks, and I welcome His Excellency Mr. Wouter Promp, who is the ambassador of the Netherlands to Pakistan. And I think Netherlands has been one of the biggest supporters of press freedoms in Pakistan. A number of great organizations we know are getting support from the Netherlands. I will give the stage to you, Mr. Pom, and thank you for joining, I think, among the first people and waiting till now. Sorry for the delay in getting to you. On to you now.
Thank you very much, Sadaf, for moderating this very interesting, fascinating webinar. It was very good, very fruitful, much food for thought. As the Netherlands, we are very happy, together with Sweden, the EU and UNESCO, to support this event, and we are, I think, absolutely ready to do more of these in the future. Actually, the Netherlands and UNESCO were planning to host the World Press Freedom Conference in the Netherlands in The Hague end of April, but unfortunately, for obvious reasons, that had to be postponed. We were very happy that Pakistan's Minister for Human Rights, Shireen Mazari, would be one of the key speakers. We hope that will still be the case when we postpone it till end of October. Maybe one or two remarks just to reflect on what was discussed earlier. First of all, I think free press and free media is not necessarily neutral media. I think it's essential that all voices and all opinions should have a chance to be heard. Also, I think it's important to mention that press freedom is so important that this kind of webinar or even a big international conference can never be a one-off effort. This will always remain a continuous process, and we as the Netherlands and the EU and also Sweden, we will continue raising issues. And as you, Sadaf, answered the question by Andrula, what the international community could do, we are always here to listen to you, to listen to people from the field, to listen to journalists, to share best practices, and to highlight certain issues when necessary. And finally, I would like to say, also because I think it was Ramsha who mentioned that journalists are often in the front line, I would like to echo what my minister said actually 2 days ago, and that is that just as medical doctors are essential workers, so are journalists. And as journalists are here to protect our freedoms as citizens, it is, or it should be, and it is our duty to protect your freedoms. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that perfect ending note. With that, I will thank all the participants. I'll thank the EU and the UNESCO for facilitating this webinar. I thank all our panelists for taking time out and sharing candidly the concerns that they have and even the confusions that they're facing. These are unprecedented time. Not all of us have answers, but we do what we do know, that today more than ever we need press freedoms, and we need everybody to work together towards that. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. There have been some resources that are shared on the chat box. We will put them together and send them out to all the people who have attended who have participated in the webinar. Okay, bye, guys.